Hello everyone, this is Zia Inspirations. Thank you so much for coming back to my channel. Thank you for all the subscribers for your love and support. Welcome to anyone new to my channel. I want to send all my love out to anyone that is having to deal with this kind of topics that I mentioned that I work with on my channel. I don't wish this kind of experiences dealing with this disease on anyone. So I send my complete condolences and love and support to everyone that has a loved one that is battling addiction. And just know that you guys are so strong. You're so strong. I give you guys so much respect in that regard because dealing with a lot of these topics, it's not easy. And so with that, I say that I have my information below if anyone feels the need to reach out. As always, I mention that I'm not of any expert. All I do is I share my own experiences in hopes that it helps others. And so with that, this topic I'm talking about is something that is extremely difficult. It's extremely difficult to talk about it, to share, but mostly to experience, and that is dealing with grief. And unfortunately, many people know that dealing with addiction, grief, can tie in very intimately with that. Now, with that being said, I do want to send all my condolences for anyone that have lost a loved one from this illness. It's like I said, it's like when dealing with grief of a loss of a loved one, there's really nothing that anyone can say to make it better. So if anyone that's out there has lost a loved one, I completely send my condolences. Grief also, the fact that we are on this earth, we are human. We do have to deal with this emotion from time to time, depending on people's situations and relationships. As I'm recording this, ironically enough, this past week, I've actually lost a very close loved one, and it was my grandfather. And he was 98, and there's some people out there that have lost a loved one that was too young. This disease takes people way too early, too soon. And so it's not fair. It's definitely not fair. So with that, it's not necessarily like the topic that I'm going to be mentioning about in this video. Before I kind of type into the points that I want to get across on this video, I'm going to talk about the 5 stages of grief that a lot of people become or are familiar with. As I list these are not in any specific order. Everyone handles and experiences grief in different ways in regards to their own situation. And so even though they might not go in any specific order for anyone, many times people can experience them at the same time more than once. And at the end of the day, there's no default timeline of how long any of these stages or how long the grieving process will go for. And I think that's where a lot of people, like even dealing with addictions, like when they start researching and looking for information, they just want to know, like, what is the antidote? Like, what is the fix? Because the pain and the feelings that they're experiencing, they just want to be done with it. And that's the same with grief. A lot of people, when they start researching and looking into grief, is because it's such a heavy, hard, painful emotions. And they just want to know, like, how long is this going to be, because they just want to be done with it. And so, unfortunately, there is no default timeline that can say you will be done XYZ. Like, there's nothing that can say, like, for anyone that unfortunately that because everyone deals with it differently. Some people experience and deal with grief shorter and longer than others. So with that being said, the first stage of, well, not, I'm sorry, not the first stage, but one of the stages that I will mention for dealing with grief is denial and isolation. Another is anger. Another is bargaining. Another is depression. And the fifth one is acceptance. And so many of us will experience some of these different times all at once. Some people can actually stay in one of those stages for an extended amount of time, a very extended amount of time. And so it's going to be, again, depend on everyone and their situation. For myself, dealing with a loved one that has addiction, I had to deal with grief several different ways that I never had to experience ever. One was dealing with the grief of a relationship. I had been with this person for several years. We were married for several years. We had a family together, and I had to grieve our relationship. And that was extremely, extremely heartbreaking and difficult for me to deal with in that regard. And this is before I found out of his addiction. After I found about his addiction, I had to go through another grieving process, which was the perception of how I thought my life was going to be. Like, things completely changed. And you kind of go through a little bit of that, like dealing with like an end of like a relationship. And what a lot of people like sometimes like even friendships, like you can even grieve over like a friendship relationship. It doesn't always have to be like a significant other or a relative. It can also be dealing with, friendships and things that people that kind of go in and out of your life that you have, it's totally acceptable to grieve that relationship. And so the beginning stages and then a lot, like for me, like I had those kind of two different grieving situations kind of like merged and condensed together. So then I was feeling a mixture of different emotions at the same time, extended amount of time, and it just varied. It went back and forth. What I think a lot of people don't talk about with this disease is like, I think like the hardest thing is to grieve for someone that's still alive. Like, that was an extremely hard thing for my mind to wrap around. Because after I grieved like the relationship, and granted, I went in and out, you went through different stages, and some things lingered longer than others. And then I had to grieve for what I thought my life was going to be. Like, I thought I was going to spend the rest of my life with this man. I thought our kids were going to grow up in a beautiful, loving home. Everything that you hope and wish for. And so those were extremely difficult. But what was even harder was when I was trying to understand it, and then it came to me. I was like, I'm having to grieve for someone that's still alive. And that was in regards to his addiction. The person that I knew and that I loved was gone. The addiction took over. I didn't understand him. I didn't recognize him. There was, besides the fact of having a small resemblance of him and look-wise, the person that I knew was gone. And I had to grieve for him, but he was still alive. That was mind-blowing to me. And I'm like, a lot of people don't really talk about this. Like, that is completely, it's one thing to grieve for someone that is gone, that their life has ended. And, like a lot of people that I talk about, like they're thankful that they're not no longer in any pain. They see them being more at peace. And then in my situation, it was like my loved one was like still like was like living like in a hell of their own making. And the person was like has no resemblance at all to the person that I knew and loved. The addiction totally took over, and there was no ounce of the person, of the soul, of who he was. But still takes the same name, still has the same body, still has the same essence, and can voice from this body that I just couldn't recognize. And so part of the healing and part of handling like that situation was I had to grieve for someone that was still alive. And it's hard for me to put into words. Like I was completely unprepared for that. Like I said, like the rationality of that, like trying to get my mind to like wrap around to that concept was extremely difficult, but it was the reality. At the end of the day, that was the reality. I had to grieve for someone that was still alive. So for anyone that's going through a kind of like a similar situation where it's hard for them to like let go, it's hard for them to accept, it's hard for them to take the focus off the individual and put the focus back on themselves and ask themselves, like, what do I want my life to look like? It's hard because the person that you still love technically is still there, and you don't want to give up hope and faith and belief that they will get better. But once you do come into that acceptance, once you start taking care of yourself first, once you start not letting yourself being manipulated, you start setting your boundaries, you no longer start enabling, and you follow the things that I mentioned on this channel, this does come into part of it, is that you have to grieve for the person of who they are now. You can still remember, appreciate, and love the person that you know who they are and who they remember you have those positive memories about. But no one knows if or when they will ever get better. And so the hardest thing for myself was having to let go of that essence, let go of that person, of who or what he was, because he was no longer there. I had to grieve for someone that was still alive. You guys, I just want to send so much love and support to all of you. Take it day by day. Know that you are so strong and that you will get through this. This is ziainspiration. Again, my information is below if anyone feels guided to or needed to talk. And I strongly advise to check out any of the other content on this channel if it's helpful towards your experience, towards your situation. But I'm sending again all my love. Take care.